My name is Leah Lovelight Michael, and I'm really on a mission here to help people come home into their bodies, moving out of fear and into love. And that really started because I grew up in a way of survival. Like life was very tumultuous as a young child. And so I lived in a lot of fear and protection, and I guarded myself in many ways. And so, over my years of life and healing through the trauma of childhood and some young adulthood, I really have recognized that we live from here up, most of us, in the mind. And really, like, the experience of life happens from here down. And so, how do we create an environment, or how do I create an environment to help people come home into their bodies and have a loving relationship with fear rather than a resisting relationship, reactive relationship with fear? So that's really the mission that I'm on and the purpose that I'm seeking to bring light to in the world. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm jumping out of order, but you mentioned a loving relationship with fear. That's definitely a unique concept. Can you sort of explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, 100%. So I wrote a book, Modern Fear, The Invisible Prison. And really, what I've noticed through life was that the way our society is structured, we're fear-based. Marketing is like into scarcity. Like, the media, I mean, especially nowadays, is scary. Like, life is scary, and it's fear is really put upon us. And when you go back to just our primal body, fear is actually the thing that keeps us alive. And so it's really a good thing, but it's been manipulated and used against us in so many ways that at this point, like, we resist fear. Like, we're like, I don't want to go down there. It's scary. And so a loving relationship is to, like, return back to the knowing that if fear is present, I don't feel safe. And so how do I find safety within fear? And so if it's an external force, obviously, then you want to move away from it. But if it's an internal state of being, like I'm feeling really stressed, or I'm anxious, or like I feel really low energy, I'm doubting myself, I have imposter syndrome, all these things that are really internal states of being that cause us to feel afraid. And so as we can just compassionately meet ourselves where we're at and just say, actually, oh, I'm feeling a little nervous. Like, I have a little bit of fear in my belly because I feel like I'm an imposter right now. Like, am I really doing something? Like, am I in the category that I'm supposed to be in? And so it's really creating this loving relationship, having a conversation with the fear rather than feeling like, oh, I'm fearful. I don't want to look at it. It's just going to shove it over here. And then if we do that, it just builds on itself and builds on itself. And then we become anxious or depressed. And we have these other states of being that really take us out of the vitality of life. Like, we become imprisoned in fear. And so that's really having a loving relationship to fear is the opposite of that.
That's awesome. So you kind of use it as an opportunity to start a conversation with yourself rather than push.
Yeah, 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 100%.
Cool. And
Yeah.
then you and Jenna Nord started Reveal Retreats. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that idea kind of came to fruition?
Yes. So Jenna and it was February of 2020. And Jenna had asked me, she was like, do you want to do a sensual skin session? And at that point in my life, there was two things that happened. Is one is I'm a yes person, so I said I'm like, yeah, of course. But then in my mind, I had a lot of trauma in my life, sexually, in many ways. I've been abused, and so I didn't feel pretty in my own skin, and I wasn't even close to feeling sensual. And so when she asked me to do a sensual skin session, I had this imposter pop up. And so I did it anyway because Jenna, I feel very safe with, and she just has this way of supporting the woman that she sees. And so I just followed her guidance. And so we did that in February. And then in March, she had snapped like a screenshot of her editing process. and sent me a photo. And when I got it, I was like, oh, that's so pretty. And then like I looked at it again and I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. And so in that moment in time, my whole reality switched because I could no longer deny that I was a pretty woman. I never wanted to be pretty. I never wanted to really be seen because that didn't feel necessarily safe from my experience of trauma. And so I then got the rest of the photos and was able to look through them. And I told Jenna, like, my personal experience of how it really was a healing session for me to be able to see myself as I've never seen myself before. And she shared with me, she's like, I know, but that's why I want all women to do this. And she also shared that, women come with their full stories. And so, I came with the protection of not really wanting to see myself, and other women come with body stories. There's so many stories that we as women have. And she said, I'm, it's a lot to carry. And she's like, I love doing it, but it's also a lot to carry. And I said, well, I really love supporting people in that carrying of that and learning to take it off. And you really love photographing. And so why don't we co-create something? And then we were talking like, well, what would it be? And then we were chit-chatting, and then the word reveal came out because it really is a revealing of self. And so that's when the idea birthed. And, March of 2020, the world changed. And it's an interesting time to try to launch a business where photography and in person is necessary. And so we kind of I'm trained in online facilitation. And so I was like, we can do this virtually and figure out how to do the photo shoots in person. So we launched a workshop. It's free to the public. It's called Reveal Your Empowered Woman. And it's just an opportunity to come for 90 minutes and nurture yourself and be seen and like have conversation with like-minded women. And then we moved that into a virtual retreat. And so that went over multiple days. And then the photo shoot would happen in person. And then we moved into in-person retreats. And so we've done now two, last July and January, we're just in Puerto Rico. And then we're doing another one in July up in Whitefish. And really, Reveal is just the invitation for the woman to come home. Ultimately, it's for the woman to come home, take off the stresses of everyday life, allow us to really settle in to our experience in the moment, not the responsibility of being a mom, not the responsibility of being a professional, not the responsibility of like maintaining a home and everything else that goes along with that, but really just the responsibility to love yourself. And that is what Reveal is. It's ultimately the invitation to be seen, to feel, to be heard, for exactly where you are, not where you think that you're expected to be. So really, we meet you where you are. And I think one of the most magical parts about Reveal is that we're participants too. We facilitate the experience, but we're in the experience with you as well. There's no like, I'm the leader, I'm on this outside. I go in the journeys with you just as Jenna goes on the journeys with you. And so it really just is a very healing experience for the participants and for us as well.
Yeah. How do you, I guess, navigate being like who you are now versus, somewhere someone wants to go, a lot of people, solopreneurs or women, they have dreams of like, well, I want to be here at this point, and here's the changes I have to make. How do you navigate them loving themselves as they are while also trying to achieve these different dreams?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the most important part of achieving a dream in the future is having a deep connection into your why. And, I like marketing is always like, I do blank and blank to help blank, and like that's the doing, it's not the being. And when we anchor into why, it doesn't make the goal to the future seem as cumbersome because we're staying in integrity to what matters most to us. And as soon as we lose that integrity to what matters most with us, it's time to ask, am I on the right path still? Do I need to make a fork in the road? Um, and in the solopreneur world, where can you find people to co-create and collaborate with? Like I am Leah Lovelight Michael. I can work on my own, but I would much rather co-create with somebody else. And so really, especially as women, inspiring each other, uplifting each other, like talking about our dreams, allowing the voice to give life to what's really inside of us, is super important. So, talking about it, sharing it, co creating, and anchoring in your why. And as soon as you lose track, like I'm building my website right now, like updating it. It's been a week and I'm like ready to pull my hair out because it's not my expertise, but I'm anchored in the why. And so it's like, okay, I'm ready to try again today. And that sometimes when we're doing something that's not our expertise but needs to be done, just remembering today I get to try again.
Yes, very important. I love that. What would you say is the hardest barrier for women to break, or barriers, if there's a few, um, in order to open up to who they are and really embrace who they are as is?
Yeah. So I think that I feel and I've noticed as well that like women almost have this guilt if they're doing it for themselves. Like even saying that, like I can feel almost pain in my heart. Because if we give to ourselves, then what are we taking away from? And I don't have children, but a lot of women I know have children, and the first thing I hear them say is like, "Oh, like I want to do this for my child," but they're not willing to do it for themselves. And I think for me, the thing to remember is whatever we're doing for ourselves, no matter what we're doing for somebody else, is what we're modeling is okay. And so I think the biggest barrier is permission. Like saying it's okay to give myself this time because I know if I nurture myself, I'm going to be able to nurture you more. I would say the next thing is women have a hard time investing money in themselves, because if I invest money in myself, what am I taking away from? There's this idea of scarcity that happens within women where if I give to myself, I'm taking away. And in reality, when we're in a true cycle of giving and receiving, if we give to ourselves, it's what we're giving out to the world as well. And what we give, we receive. And so moving from this fear of scarcity into this permission of abundance, I think is one of the biggest barriers that women face in doing it for themselves. So
I love that. Um, and what do you feel is the greatest kind of misconception about your work or what you do on a daily basis?
oh. I think the greatest misconception is people really like is for my work or for reveal? Can I ask a clarifying question there?
Um, I guess either one or
Okay.
both if you
Okay.
feel one is more important than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the biggest misconception is that to love yourself is like almost instantaneous. Whereas really loving yourself is a choice that you make in some situations moment by moment. And it's definitely something that you make day by day. And my work is really helping people transition from not liking themselves that much to actually really loving themselves. Even when they don't love them like themselves, we can still love ourselves. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it should be something that I can just be. Like why can't I just love myself? And the truth is there's a lot of stories that prevent us from loving ourselves. There's a lot of behaviors that we do on a regular basis that even though we're not conscious of, subconsciously we don't like. Our numbing behaviors and addictive behaviors and our avoidant behaviors and the fact that like we will do things to ourselves that we would never do to somebody else. And we don't think about those as like causing harm, but we do. And so, loving yourself is a journey, and you never actually really truly get to the final destination because love is a continuous experience. And so I think that, the misconception of like wanting the instant fix, the how to's, the just tell me the 5 steps I need to do to be able to like love myself. And it's like, well, I can give you 5 steps, but unless you're putting it into practice, like you're not going to get very far. So, um, and I think that goes in with reveal pretty simply. The returning home to yourself with reveal is radical self acceptance, like loving yourself for exactly who you are, not who you want to be, not who you were, but who you are right now. So there's no instant, man, I love myself. And I think a lot of people want that, or they look at you and think, oh, she's never experienced a hardship, and that's not true. We all go through hard things. Everyone, we're human.
Yes. Yeah, something that is also hard for me to think about is like people's levels of hardship too. It's like, well, I had both my parents die at a young age, and I've been living with an abusive family member, and I've had this terrible hard life, and it is hard to look and be like, okay, well, I guess I grew up and I had both my parents and was decently well off. Maybe I don't have any right to be upset about this job or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I hear that a lot. I feel like it's kind of almost like comparative suffering. Like you've had it harder than me. So because your hardship, appears harder, I'm not allowed to my own feelings, but our feelings are our internal state. And so if we don't give ourselves permission to feel exactly what we feel, um, we're never going to be true to ourselves. We come out of integrity. And so, yes, people might have had a harder life, but you still had a hard life in whatever way you experienced it, in that sense. So I think like taking away like comparative suffering is really important. I think taking away comparison is important in general, but yeah, because nobody knows what your internal world feels like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you encourage women practice self-care or self-love in their daily lives?
Yeah. So do it first. Like, my self-care happens first thing in the morning, whether it's 5 minutes. Some days I like to take an hour, some days I like to take an hour and a half, depending on how much time I have. And I set my alarm early for that. Like I actually prioritize my self-care. So do it first if you can, like before you give to anyone else. And then the other thing that I always suggest is like have a list of like go-to things that make you feel good. So like if you're, having kind of a crappy day and you just need something that feels good, like you can look at this list, because when you're having a crappy day, you're in your fight, flight, or freeze brain. You don't have this creative frontal cortex online. And so having that list, you can say, oh, I actually really love having sunlight on my face. I'm going to go stand outside for a minute and breathe a few times. So just having that list of like feel goods available. And then once a week, I schedule. I'm a Capricorn, very regimented as much as I'm like free in my heart. I actually schedule like a 90-minute nurture session. So I take a bath and I massage my body. And then when I get out, if I've had a skinny dip candle lit, I can take that oil and rub it on my body, afterwards. And like just really taking time to nurture and nourish ourselves. Because again, what we do for ourselves creates the example of how we want other people to treat us too. And so it's a priority. And so you have to make it a priority for you, or just continue to stay depleted. But I don't think anybody wants that anymore. I think society's ready to feel good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There was a theory I'd heard about is the 20 somethings like states of feeling, and how like there's the top feeling that's the one that feels the best, and then there's the feeling that feels the worst. And it was saying like, all right, well, if you're down here, even if you can get 2 steps up, that's a little better. And so like the idea was like how to slowly but surely build your way up to
Yeah.
the other ones, just using those little things, taking a bath or nurturing yourself. And yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, 100%. There's this idea that we want to go straight to the finish line. And sometimes like just that one notch up is like enough to take you out of this like lower experience. So I think just having those micro steps that just bring you that can elevate you a little are really important. And that's taking time to actually know yourself.
Yeah. Right. I guess you kind of covered modern fear a little bit, but if you want to go into a little more detail about that and your process of writing and what you cover in there.
Yeah, so I went to a Best Year Ever Blueprint seminar with Hal Elrod, who's the author of The Miracle Morning. And it was the first time I'd ever been to a personal development experience. And it's a high like you never know because everybody's like, you can do it, you can do it. And like they left there and, you can write a book in 90 days. And I was like, heck yeah, I can totally do it. And so I went home and I started writing, and I actually had, 20 something thousand words in 90 days. And like, I was like, okay, this feels good. And then I handed it off to somebody to read, and the response was, it was, you know, it fell flat in my opinion. It wasn't what I expected. So I was like, oh, go back to the blueprint and start writing again, going deeper. And then I gave it off to another person, and they're like, I learned some stuff, but I'd like to see more of you. And then I was like, okay. And so then I started writing again, put a little bit of me in it, and then felt like it was good. And then I was ready to send it off to another editor. And right before I sent it off, I had fear. I was afraid to feel all the feelings I had. So I ripped myself out of the book and then sent it off to the editor. And then she came back and said, it was great. I learned a lot, and I would love to see more of you in it. And so really in this idea of modern fear, I share my story pretty explicitly of what I went through growing up, a single mom of 4 children, very impoverished, all of the abuse that I experienced. I don't go into great detail of it, but I share my story. And really going through these elements of learning to love myself, because when I know in my own personal experience, I hated myself. And hate is a very strong word to use, but I hated myself. I hated my life. I just didn't want to be here anymore in a lot of ways for a lot of my childhood. And as an adult, I numbed and I did destructive behavior. I partied a lot. I had a lot of fun, but it was like not healthy fun. And in that partying and those destructive behaviors, I was always a highly functioning, successful person on the outside. But on the inside, I was literally rotting. And I was very reactive, and I had a lot of turmoil. And so, in the process of writing the book, it took me 5 years to actually be able to release it. And I'm actually working with another company right now to refine it even more because there is an important message in it. Um, and so the book itself is a living experience. And so I really go through these like 4 patterns of what I recognize. So the first one is we have to recognize exactly where we are with acceptance. Like my acceptance was I didn't like myself. My acceptance was like it was really not pretty at all. And how do I start to heal that process and like the different ways that I had to look at my lifestyle? I had to look at the stories that I was carrying that weren't really mine, all of the emotions that I was holding. And then after we recognize what we're going through or where we are, and we start this healing journey, because even just bringing your awareness to something you haven't wanted to look at changes that experience within. And so as we release these, everybody says, oh, release, let go. But we're whole beings. And so if we're releasing, we are like making this big hole in ourselves. And so the next step is to reclaim. So if I'm releasing fear, what am I reclaiming? Like, and then I have to rewire my focus towards what I'm reclaiming. And so it goes recognize, reclaim, rewire. And then as we begin the cycle of rewiring, because everything comes around on a cycle. I don't know if you've been on a healing journey, but it's like, oh, I healed that. And then you're like, I thought I healed that. So it always comes back. So like be in a different way and less, I say like, the waves get bigger and like the trough gets bigger. And then really starting to receive from the work we do. Like, and in that receiving, it's like celebrating how far we've actually come. So the book really is designed to take a person through a process while also really disclosing my process in it, and like really recognizing where we are imprisoning ourselves. Like we want to, like, our internal world creates our external reality. And a lot of people believe that like the external world creates the internal world. And so it's taking ownership and responsibility of your life, which is not always easy, but worth it. Not always easy, but worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Well, that was all the questions I had for you. Is there anything that you want to share in particular to Skinny Dip followers or just to women in general that you think is important?
Yeah, so I first just want to say thank you for your product. Skinny Dip is an integral part of our experience now, and so for Reveal, and I really appreciate what you're doing. And to those that are listening, what permission can you give yourself to create some self care for yourself? And I highly, actually, do really recommend a Skinny Dip candle, and after a bath, rubbing it on your body because it's really nourishing. So, yeah, that's what I would definitely say.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I feel like I've already learned a whole lot, even just in this like a little bit. So this is
Yeah.
awesome. And I'm so excited to get this out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for this opportunity. It was really
Yeah.
fun.